I always knew I wasn't the favorite child. It wasn't one of those things you suspect, it was a fact, as solid and unchangeable as the foundation of our family home. My sister, Chloe, was the sun my parents orbited. She was the artist, the free spirit, the one with so much potential that never quite materialized into anything resembling a stable career or, frankly, a responsible adult. I was the opposite. I was the planner, the pragmatic one, the one who went to a state school, got a sensible degree in finance, and built a life for myself brick by boring, reliable brick. My role in the family was simple. I was the ATM and the emergency contact. The walking, talking safety net. For years, I played the part without complaint, because what else was I supposed to do? They were my family. I'd get the calls, usually from my mother, her voice a carefully crafted blend of casualness and desperation. "Honey, Chloe's a little short on rent this month, you know how it is with her art," or from my dad, "Your mother's car needs a major repair, and things are just a bit tight." I always said yes. I transferred the money, paid the bill, solved the problem. In return, I received flimsy promises of being paid back when things turned around and a healthy dose of criticism about my own life choices. Why wasn't I more spontaneous? Why did I work so much? Why didn't I come to every single last-minute family dinner, even though I lived 2 hours away and they knew I had to be up at 5 a.m.? The irony was so thick you could choke on it. They relied on the fruits of my boring life while simultaneously mocking the tree it grew on. But the biggest thing, the one that truly mattered to me, was the house. It was the house I grew up in, the one my grandparents built. I had poured so much of myself into it, not just memories, but money. 5 years ago, my dad came to me with a grand plan for a new roof and a kitchen remodel. It was going to cost a fortune, almost $80,000. He sat me down, looked me in the eye and said, "This is an investment in your future, too. This house will be yours and Chloe's one day. If you help us now, we'll make sure it's more than made right in the end." I believed him. Like an idiot, I believed him. I transferred the money, and I have the bank statements and the email chain to prove it. That promise became my anchor, the thing that made all the other sacrifices feel, if not fair, at least logical. It was my inheritance, earned not by birthright, but by service. The call came on a Tuesday. A state trooper with a somber voice explaining there had been a car accident. My parents were gone. The world just stopped. For a week, I was numb. I handled everything, of course. I made the arrangements, I notified the relatives, I held Chloe while she sobbed dramatically, as if she hadn't just been complaining to me a week prior that they were stifling her creative genius. I was the responsible one, even in grief. Then came the day we were all supposed to meet at the family attorney's office, a man named Mr. Davies whom I'd never met. It was me, Chloe, and my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, who always had a knack for seeing things clearly. I walked into that stuffy, wood-paneled office feeling a strange sense of finality. This was it. The moment my father's promise would be fulfilled. The moment my years of quiet support would be acknowledged. Chloe was already there, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. She was wearing a black designer dress that I was certain she couldn't afford. She gave me a weak, wobbly smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Davies, a portly man with kind eyes that turned out to be entirely misleading, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time." He opened a thick leather-bound folder, and my heart started to pound. This was the final straw, but not in the way I expected. He began to read the last will and testament of my parents. It was standard, boilerplate stuff at first, but then he got to the disposition of assets. He looked up over his glasses, first at Chloe, then at me. "To my daughter, Chloe," he read, "I bequeath my entire estate, including the property at 123, Maple Lane, all financial accounts, stocks, bonds, and personal effects." He paused, and in that silence, I felt the floor drop out from under me. He then turned to me, his expression unreadable. "And to my other daughter," he continued, his voice neutral, "for all her support over the years, I bequeath the sum of $5,000, so she can take a nice vacation. She's earned it, $5,000. A vacation. My vision swam. It wasn't just an omission, it was a slap in the face. A joke. A cruel, final punchline to a lifetime of being their personal bank. My entire contribution, my sacrifice, my $80,000 investment, dismissed with a pittance meant for a cruise. Chloe sniffled, a perfect little performance of sorrowful gratitude. "Oh, Mommy, Daddy," she whispered. I just stared at the wall, the blood roaring in my ears. This was the moment I stopped being their daughter and became something else entirely. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words. Aunt Carol, God bless her, let out a small, audible gasp. Her eyes darted from the will in Mr. Davies's hands to my face, her expression a mixture of shock and pity. Chloe, on the other hand, was composing herself with theatrical grace. She reached across the polished mahogany table and placed a condescending hand on my arm. "I know this is hard," she cooed, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "But they knew you were the strong one. They knew you could take care of yourself." Her words were meant to sound like a compliment, but they landed like an accusation. "You have money, so you don't deserve any of ours." That was the real message. I slowly pulled my arm away from her touch. My numbness was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I looked from her perfectly made-up face to the attorney, who was now shuffling papers, clearly uncomfortable. He wouldn't meet my gaze. I took a deep, steadying breath. This wasn't the time to scream or cry. That's what they would expect. That's what Chloe wanted. She wanted me to be the hysterical, ungrateful daughter, making a scene so she could play the part of the calm, grieving heiress. No. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I turned my chair slightly to face her directly. "The strong one," I repeated, my voice quiet but carrying an edge of steel that made her flinch. "Is that what they called me while I was paying for your car insurance for 3 years?" Chloe's manufactured smile faltered. "That's not fair." "You offered, did I?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or did Mom call me, crying, saying you were going to lose your license if I didn't help? Let's talk about the time I paid off your 3 maxed-out credit cards so you could get the security deposit on that loft apartment you abandoned after 6 months. Or what about the loan for your art supplies that somehow turned into a trip to Bali?" Each question was a bullet, and I could see them hitting their mark. Her face was losing its color. "You're twisting things," she stammered, looking to Mr. Davies for help, but he was suddenly fascinated by a spot on the carpet. Aunt Carol just sat there, shaking her head slowly. I wasn't finished. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let's not forget the biggest thing, Chloe. The $80,000 investment I made in this house. The house that is now, apparently, all yours. Dad promised me it would be made right in the end." Is this what he meant by right? Chloe's jaw snapped shut. For the first time, a flicker of genuine panic appeared in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her voice a little too high-pitched. "Dad never mentioned anything like that to me, of course, he hadn't. Why would he?" Admitting to her that their precious family home was propped up by the boring daughter's money would have shattered the illusion of their self-sufficiency. "Oh, he mentioned it to me," I said, my tone dangerously sweet. "He mentioned it in person, over the phone, and in several emails when we were coordinating the transfer with the contractors. You know, the ones who put on the new roof and completely gutted the kitchen? The kitchen you love to post pictures of on your Instagram." I let that sink in. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head as she tried to formulate a defense. This was the rising action, the part of the movie where the villain starts to realize the hero has a trump card. I wasn't just lashing out in grief anymore. I was building a case. I had spent years documenting everything. Not because I was planning for this exact scenario, but because I'm a finance person. I track everything. Every major transfer, every significant loan. I had a folder on my laptop meticulously labeled family financials. It was my own private ledger of their dependency. Aunt Carol finally spoke up, her voice firm. "She's right, Chloe. I remember your father talking about how much her help meant. he was worried they'd have to take out a second mortgage before she stepped in. Chloe shot our aunt a venomous glare. "You're taking her side." "There are no sides, dear," Aunt Carol said calmly. "There's just the truth," Chloe scoffed, turning her back on our aunt and focusing on me again. Her fear was now being replaced by her default setting, entitled indignation. "So what? You want your money back? After everything Mom and Dad did for you?" The sheer audacity of that question almost made me laugh. "Everything they did for me? You mean raising me? That's what parents are supposed to do." I, on the other hand, was not legally or morally obligated to be their personal slush fund for the last decade. "And yes, Chloe, I do want my money back." She threw her hands up in the air. "Well, you can't have it. The will is the will. Mr. Davies said so. You get $5,000, and I get the house. It's over." Her voice was shrill, desperate. She was looking at me with pure hatred, as if I were the one who had wronged her. It was in that moment that all the pieces clicked into place. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I let her proclamation hang in the air for a moment, savoring the look of triumphant finality on her face. She truly believed she had won. She thought the will was an impenetrable fortress, and she was its queen. But she forgot one crucial detail: I'm the one who knows how to build things, and I'm also the one who knows how to tear them down, legally and methodically. I gave her a small, tight smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that says, "Checkmate, you're absolutely right, Chloe," I said, my voice smooth as glass. Her smug expression solidified. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, ready to receive my surrender. I could see her already mentally redecorating my childhood bedroom into her new meditation studio. "The will is the will," I continued, turning my attention to the attorney, who was now watching me with a newfound interest. "I have no intention of contesting my parents' wishes. They made their decision perfectly clear." Chloe let out a little puff of relieved air. Aunt Carol looked at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. I wasn't done. "However," I said, and that one word shifted the entire atmosphere in the room. I reached into my briefcase, the one I had brought with me just in case, and pulled out a neatly organized binder. I placed it on the table with a soft but decisive thud. "While I will not contest the will," I announced, looking directly at Mr. Davies, "I will be filing a creditor's claim against the estate for all outstanding debts owed to me by the deceased." Mr. Davies's eyebrows shot up into his hairline. Chloe just stared at the binder, her face a mask of confusion. "What? What is that?" she demanded. I flipped open the binder to the first page. It was a summary sheet. "This," I said, tapping the page, "is a detailed record of all personal loans I provided to our parents over the past 7 years. It includes $80,000 for the 2018 home renovation, $15,000 for the payoff of their car loan in 2020, and approximately $22,000 in various smaller amounts to cover everything from property taxes to emergency medical bills. All documented with bank statements, email correspondence, and in some cases, signed promissory notes. I had them draw up for my records totaling," I paused for dramatic effect, looking directly at my sister, $117,000, plus accrued interest at a very reasonable market rate. The silence in that office was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Chloe's face had gone from smug to confused to utterly, devastatingly pale. The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. You can't do that," she finally whispered, the words barely audible. I looked at Mr. Davies. "Can I do that, Mr. Davies?" The attorney, who had been rapidly scanning the summary sheet and a few of the tabs I had marked, cleared his throat. He looked at Chloe with an expression that was no longer kind or sympathetic, but purely professional. He said, his voice formal. "If your sister has the documentation to prove these were loans and not gifts, then yes. She can file a creditor's claim. The estate is legally obligated to settle all legitimate debts before any assets can be distributed to the beneficiaries. Chloe swiveled her head to look at me, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. The reality of the situation was crashing down on her like a tidal wave. She wasn't inheriting a free and clear, multi-million-dollar property. She was inheriting a massive debt. A debt to me. "This is the family home," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You can't take the family home." "I'm not taking the home, Chloe," I replied, my voice still unnervingly calm. I was a surgeon making a clean, precise incision. The estate has to sell its primary asset, the house, in order to pay its largest creditor, which happens to be me. Whatever is left after the sale, the closing costs, the legal fees, and my $117,000 plus interest check is cleared, well, that's all yours. As the will dictates, I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. The climax wasn't a shouting match. It was the cold, hard math she had always been able to ignore, because I was always there to fix it for her. But not anymore. I had just presented her with a bill for a lifetime of taking me for granted. Aunt Carol, who had been watching this all unfold, slowly reached over and patted my hand. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a lifetime of validation packed into a single touch. Chloe just sat there, utterly broken. The Queen was deposed. Her castle was about to be liquidated. The aftermath was exactly as pathetic and predictable as I knew it would be. The floodgates opened before I even got back to my car. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Chloe texted, "You are a monster. Mom and Dad would be so ashamed of you." I read it, felt absolutely nothing, and kept walking. By the time I was on the highway, heading back to my own home, the one I paid for myself, the call started. First, it was Chloe again, sobbing hysterically. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, swinging wildly from accusations, "You're just jealous of me," to pathetic pleading, "Where am I supposed to live? You're making me homeless." Then came the flying monkeys. An uncle I hadn't spoken to in a year called to tell me I was tearing the family apart over a little bit of money. I almost laughed. I just said, "The estate has a debt to settle. Talk to the estate's attorney," and hung up. The family group chat, which I had long since muted, was apparently exploding. Aunt Carol sent me a screenshot later. It was a digital firing squad, with me as the target. They called me selfish, greedy, cold-hearted, and vindictive. It was funny, really. They never seemed to have a problem with my money when it was flowing in their direction. My response to the chaos was silence. I blocked Chloe's number. I blocked the numbers of the relatives who called to harass me. I communicated only through my own lawyer, whom I hired the very next day. He dealt with Mr. Davies, who, as the executor, had no choice but to follow the law. The process was swift. The creditor's claim was validated. The house, valued at just over $2 million, was put on the market. Chloe tried to fight it. She tried to claim my documents were fake. She tried to say the money was a gift. But my binder was airtight. Emails, bank transfers with memos like loan for kitchen Reno, even the promissory notes my dad had so casually signed, it was all there. My financial prudence, the very thing they mocked me for, had become my sword and shield. It was deliciously ironic. I was just applying the cold, hard logic they had taught me to value so little. The house sold in less than a month. It was a hot market. After the fees, commissions, and capital gains taxes were sorted, my lawyer called me. The check from the estate was ready. It was for $124,351.67. The interest had been calculated down to the penny. I told him to wire it directly into my investment account. I didn't feel a rush of joy or a pang of guilt. I felt balanced. The scales, which had been tipped against me for my entire life, were finally level. Chloe's inheritance, after my debt was paid and all other expenses were settled, was a lot less than she had dreamed. After the sale of the house, there was still a significant amount of cash left from my parents' savings and investments. But once my bill was paid, and the lawyers took their cuts, her grand inheritance of an entire estate was whittled down to something far more modest. It was still a life-changing amount of money for most people, more than enough to set herself up comfortably for years if she were smart. But I knew Chloe. She wasn't smart with money. She saw it as a tool to maintain a lifestyle, not build a life. I heard through Aunt Carol that the first thing she did was buy a brand new luxury SUV and rent a ridiculously expensive penthouse apartment downtown, trying to keep up the appearance of the wealthy heiress. She was trying to prove to everyone, and probably to herself, that I hadn't really won. But I knew it was a facade. She had inherited a sum of money, but she had lost the one thing she had always taken for granted, her safety net. Her emergency contact was gone. Her free ride was over. And that, I knew, was a bill that would eventually come due, and it was one she would have to pay all by herself. There would be no more calls to her responsible sister to bail her out. I had made sure of that. The silence from my end was no longer passive, it was a definitive, binding statement. The family bank was permanently closed. A few months passed. The angry text stopped. The flying monkeys retreated to their corners. I assumed they had all settled into their new reality. I went on with my life, and for the first time, it felt truly my own. The cloud of familial obligation that had been hanging over me for decades had finally lifted. I felt lighter. I took that $5,000 my parents had left me in their will, the vacation money, and I actually booked a trip. A real one. 3 weeks in Italy, something I had always wanted to do but had always put off because something might come up with the family. The freedom was intoxicating. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" I said. "It's me," the voice on the other end said. It was Chloe. Her voice was thin, stripped of all its usual confidence and theatricality. It was the voice of someone who had finally hit a wall. I didn't say anything. I just waited. I need your help," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The property taxes on the apartment are due, and I'm a little short. And the car payment, it's just a lot all at once." I could picture her perfectly, sitting in her overpriced apartment, surrounded by things she couldn't really afford, the reality of budgets and consequences finally sinking its teeth into her. The old me, the responsible victim me, would have felt a pang of sympathy. A flicker of duty. But that person was gone. She had died in that lawyer's office. "I see," I said, my voice completely flat. "And why are you calling me?" "Because you're my sister," she cried, a hint of her old indignant tone creeping back in. "Because we're family. You have all this money now, you can help me." "All this money?" She meant my money. The money I earned. The money I had to legally pry from her fingers. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement was breathtaking. It was a disease, and she was patient zero. "Chloe," I said, and my voice was calm, but it was the calm of a hanging judge. "Let me be very clear so there is no confusion. Our financial relationship is over. That family bank you relied on your entire life has been permanently dissolved. You received your inheritance. It was more than enough to live on. What you chose to do with it is your responsibility, not mine." She started to cry then, but these weren't the crocodile tears from the lawyer's office. These sounded real. They were the tears of genuine desperation. "But I'll be evicted. They'll take the car. What am I supposed to do?" she wailed. For a second, a tiny, buried part of me felt a twinge. But then I remembered. I remembered every dismissive comment, every thankless check I wrote, every time I was made to feel small so she could feel big. I remembered the will reading, the smug look on her face as she inherited everything while I was tossed a pittance for a nice vacation. That memory was like a splash of ice water, extinguishing that final, flickering ember of misplaced duty. "I don't know what you're supposed to do, Chloe," I said, and for the first time, I was being completely honest. "You could get a job, perhaps. You could sell the ridiculously expensive car you bought. You could move into an apartment you can actually afford. These are what adults call the solutions. You should try 1 inch. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. She was furious. I hate you, she spat. I truly hate you. I know, I replied softly. The feeling is mutual, and with that, I hung up the phone. I blocked her number for good this time. I sat there in the quiet of my own home, the silence no longer feeling empty, but peaceful. Vindicated. My family painted me as the villain of this story. The cold, heartless sister who destroyed her family over money. But they got it wrong. I didn't destroy our family, I just held up a mirror and forced them to look at what they had become. I didn't do it for the money. I did it for the respect they never gave me. I did it to reclaim the years of my life I spent propping them up, only to be tossed aside when they thought they didn't need me anymore. They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that sometimes, the only thing you can do when your own blood tries to bleed you dry is to cut off the supply. So now I turn to you. After everything you've heard, after a lifetime of being their crutch only to be kicked away, tell me. Was I wrong?